Hey guys, there's two reasons you're gonna wanna watch this video. The first one is, you've already got a stump jumper, you got it home, and you couldn't find your flip chip. If you got an alloy model, I'm gonna tell you how to do that. Second reason is, you're thinking about a stump jumper and you know it has the flip chip technology, you've read about it, the idea of adjusting your geometry sounds really good. You're gonna see exactly what you get with that and how it might impact your riding and what's important to you. So I'm just like you guys, do a lot of research before I buy a bike. Here I am on the Specialized website, 2021 Stumpjumper Alloy, clearly talks about flip chip technology. I apologize in advance for the bike being a total mess. It started raining and snowing here in Texas before I could wash the bike up for this video. So super excited, got my bike, bought it online, got to the shop, got it loaded up. COVID being what it was, I couldn't really get a good look at the bike, and I didn't have time to spend with it before I picked it up at the shop. So I got home, started doing my my tinkering and my upgrades, got some new brakes, and a handful of other things I'll cover in another video. But one of the things I wanted to do was adjust the suspension here by flipping the flip chip. And I went to do it on the yoke, and to my surprise, there was no flip chip. I even went so far as to drop this suspension linkage, thinking maybe it was inside or on the bottom there, and a little different from some of the other models. But on the alloy model of the stump jumper, the flip chip is right here. And so what you can see is this bowl on the horst suspension is a little smaller on this side than it is on this side. And so by flipping that bowl on both sides of the bike, you get your change in geometry. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I'll also cover off on some of the changes that gives you if you're still shopping for a bike and think flip chip is part of your decision. We got the bike set up. We're gonna break down that back suspension and go ahead and flip the chip on it. We've got a 5 mil and a 6 mil hex, and then I got this little tool from Park. I love this little piece. You can take it off and keep your chain in place using the rear axle off the bike. So first thing we want to do is go ahead and take the back tire off, just get this thing out of the way. So we're gonna break this down. I'm gonna go ahead and lock out my derailleur. Make sure that's out of your way. I'm gonna take this guy off. I wanna avoid contaminating that back brake. So this little piece I showed you just goes through on your axle, and then it holds your place. You just set your chain on it, and then you can release your chain, and that just keeps everything nice, neat, out of the way. So the first step here is we're gonna take our 6 hex, and we're gonna just drop this suspension. The other thing I'm gonna do is just take a little piece of cardboard. I'm just gonna slide it in here because these are gonna make contact once we get the pressure out of the suspension, and I just don't wanna that to hit. So you gotta break this shock off by removing this hex here. I'm just gonna kind of hold it, do this last little bit by hand. But this will take the pressure out of the suspension system. I just wanna pull this a little bit up. Drop it, not to put pressure on the threads. And then I'm just gonna drop that. That'll give me a little bit of wiggle room in the suspension now that that's dropped. And so we'll just, good. Now I'm gonna move to the back here. And as I showed you earlier, instead of your flip chip being here, this is what changes your geometry on the alloy edition. So I'm just gonna take these out on both sides. It's got a threaded piece and then a washer piece, and then it's got spacers on each side of the suspension. So just be careful, those washers may drop out. So we're just gonna pull these guys off. And I'm just gonna take care to, as I take these off, I'm just gonna take care to set them on my workbench here. So I know which direction they go and what side they came off of. I'm gonna go ahead and do this side. And all we gotta do is pull these out and then flip them. And I'm gonna go through the specs on exactly how this changes. There goes one of them. I'm gonna go through the specs on exactly how this changes your geometry. So it may put a little bit of pressure on this last one as you pull it out, because your suspension is gonna wanna drop a little bit. So there's that. Okay, so those are out. So I'm gonna work this inside piece out. Okay. All right, so we got all of our pieces out here. And now all I've got to do is rotate that around on the screw and get my inside piece ready. What I'm going to tell you is a little trick here. So if you take the inside piece and you place that first, and then you find that piece with your bolt, and what you're going to do is just force this suspension to move a little bit. And if you get that inside piece in first, it's so much easier to get this outside piece in. So, and these little, there's washers on the inside of this. If those come out, don't worry about it. You can just pop them back in if they fall out on the floor. All right, so that's that side. I'm gonna come back later with my torque wrench, and I highly recommend, if you're working on the suspension of these bikes, that you get a torque wrench so you can set these just at the right torque per the factory spec. I will put a link to my torque wrench on Amazon, and then I'll also put a link to the torque specs on the Specialized website for this specific suspension. And they do not make it easy to find. So I'll put that in the comments. And again, I'm just gonna kind of move this around, but I got that inside washer, which is the threaded piece. I put that in first, and then I'm just gonna move this around a little bit until this outside piece sets in. And then I'm just gonna take my hex tool, tighten that back up. I'm just gonna hand tighten these for now. I'm gonna show you my hex tool, and then we'll tighten these to the spec in just a minute. Okay, so that's sorted. This is straight from the factory, but I'm gonna tell you, this suspension linkage is already a little bit dry. So I'm gonna get some grease on that, and I'm also gonna put a little bit of Loctite back on this, just to keep it nice and tight, since it'll be moving a lot, and then give this a little bit more grease, fresh grease, than what they gave it in the factory. All right, I just want to show you what I did off camera here. We got a little bit of grease on this. Factory grease was really, really light, and then just a little bit of Loctite in here, and I've got the removable, that's the 242 Loctite. You don't want to use anything too strong on this, and you don't want to get it on there too thick, because you don't want to contaminate the part that's supposed to be lubed. And then I've got this PPL1 Park grease that I really, really like. So I'll put those in the links to those in case you guys need them in the comments. And so this, you got to wrestle this just a little bit. I'm just going to eyeball it and get my, what you really don't want to do is screw up your threads there. So you want to make sure you got enough pressure off that you pretty much get it into place before you put the screw in. And then again, I'm just going to hand tighten this for now. I'm just going to use my 6 on this. We're going to get this hand tight, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do these to spec. Because again, really, really important. You don't want to over tighten this. It'll lock that shock in place. It's great. I got a little bit of grease coming out there, which I'd like to see. So that's great. So now I'm gonna grab the torque wrench and we're gonna get these locked down to spec. We're gonna tighten this up to torque spec now. So I got 2 different torque wrenches that I'm using to do this because it crosses the capacity of them. I've got a smaller one and then a bigger one. This one's from Park Tool. I went ahead and spent the money on the one that gets up into the higher torque specs and got the Park Tool. This is a 6.2. I'll link to this in the comments. And then I've got the smaller one that I got on Amazon, which is a nice little torque wrench, very affordable. And I'm gonna use this for the other. So here's what we've got. So that tells you exactly when to stop those. So you get the exact right torque setting on there. So I'm gonna grab my other torque here. Sorry about that. And I'm gonna point this up. Here we go. Boy, that was close. It's amazing. It's really not that tight. So that one was really close already. I've just done that by hand, so that tells you how easy it is to over tighten these. It was almost there, and I thought I was just getting it snug. All right, so we've got it. We've got it done. We've got the geometry changed on this bike. We're gonna get the tire back on. We're gonna go and we're gonna talk a little bit about the changes that gives you in geometry. We're gonna talk about head tube angle, seat post angle, and I think potentially most importantly is your bottom bracket height. And so we're talking about 7 mil of change in your bottom bracket height, which I'm gonna show you exactly what that means if you don't have a concept of it. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the other changes to the geometry. So what I think is probably one of the more important aspects of changing the geometry is raising the bottom bracket. And if you're in Texas like I am, there's lots of rocks here. And so 7 mils doesn't sound like a lot, and it's really not, but I wanted to just give you a sense of what that is. It's essentially the size of an eraser. So it's enough to make a difference if you're really concerned about your bottom bracket height, if you're having pedal strikes or you're having a lot of strikes with your cranks. 7 mil can be a big difference. All right, so what I've done here is I've collected all of the low and high and change for the 2 different positions in with the flip chip set, high or low. This is for an S3, but what you can see here is pretty minimal changes in terms of millimeter for stack, chainstay length, reach, wheelbase trail, bottom bracket drop, and then for your bottom bracket height, you get a 7 mil change. So we covered that earlier. That can be a big deal depending on where you are. And then if you're really pretty dialed in as a rider, you might notice a half a degree difference in your seat tube angle and your head tube angle, but that's really dependent on your riding style. I will tell you, I feel like the bike looks a little bit less slack, a little bit less stretched out after the adjustment, but I will also link in the video to Stumpjumper's page where they have these are kind of all spread out across the page. It's not really easy to see them all in one place. So I've pulled them together here, but I'll also link to that section of the website. If you aren't familiar with what stack is and reach and some of these different measurements, there's a pretty neat little tool on there that will show you what part of the bike measurement they're actually talking about here. So look for that in the comments. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it was useful. We'll be doing some upgrades to the Stumpjumper, so be sure to follow for those. And comment, tell me what else you'd like to see, and we'll get into it. Thanks.